Ladies and gentlemen, we are 2 days removed from Season 5, Volume 1 of Stranger Things releasing, and today I'm going to be speculating and theorizing of which characters could die in the final episodes, the final 2 volumes, because technically we didn't really see anybody officially die in Volume 1, but we did see a lot of hints that could, make us make some theories of how certain characters could die, and I have a few of those to tell you today. So before we get into it, be sure to drop a like, subscribe, turn on post notifications. Let's go for 250 likes on this video, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so the first characters I want to talk about are Ted and Karen. Obviously, I think Karen is going to end up surviving, but I could see a scenario where Ted just doesn't survive the injuries, and that could be a death. But then again, it kind of would be pointless to just kill off Ted at this point because he's in a coma. Might as well let him live and hopefully live a happy ending. In my opinion, I feel like that would be good for Ted. But honestly, I was surprised that they didn't kill off Ted right away and they just announced that he was in a coma. I feel like that would have been a perfect death right away to scare everybody and be like, holy crap, this is real. Ted just died, but he's still alive and he is in a medically induced coma. So he wasn't even in a coma before the injuries. He just got put into one. I do think both of those characters will end up living after all, even though I do think Ted should die. Moving on to the next 2 characters I want to talk about. And these 2 characters, I have 2 theories about how each of them could die. But if one character dies, then the other one's going to live, in my opinion. And it's Steve and Jonathan. So first we're going to go off of how Steve could die. Okay, so in Season 5, Volume 1, we saw, Steve and Jonathan argue a little bit about Nancy. Jonathan thinks Steve's trying to get Nancy, and maybe he is, but either way, he just wants the best for Nancy. That's what Steve wants. He wants the best for Nancy, and if that's Jonathan, I believe Steve would be okay with that at the end of the day. He just wants Jonathan to be a better man for Nancy, and I think he's right in saying that as well. But Jonathan is, getting prepared to take that next step. He wants to get engaged with Nancy. That's why he got Murray to get him a ring, and that was in the tape recorder, or the tape or whatever, the music. And whenever I saw that ring, I immediately thought of, oh, this is how Steve could die. I guarantee you Steve could find a ring. I think Steve could find that ring and realize Jonathan's ready to take that next step and want to sacrifice himself for Jonathan so Nancy can live happily ever after. I could see a scenario of that. So whether that's the Demogorgon coming after Jonathan, Steve sees the ring fall on the floor or whatever, and then he ends up stepping in front of the Demogorgon to save Jonathan, and we see all these flashbacks of Steve, and it's such an emotional death. In another way this could happen is Jonathan gets Vecna'd, and Steve has to find music to save Jonathan. He finds Jonathan's new tape, opens it, realizes there's a ring in there, and then that's how Steve decides to sacrifice himself for Jonathan and realized that Jonathan was willing to take that next step. He was ready to secure Nancy for life, all this stuff, and be the better man that Steve was telling him to be. And that's how Steve could get the encouragement and the motivation to sacrifice his life for Jonathan and for Nancy. But I could say the same thing about Jonathan. Maybe Jonathan will realize that he's not the man for Nancy and Steve is actually the man for Nancy, and he sees Steve in danger and he ends up sacrificing his life for Steve. So I could see this going either way, but I could definitely see either Steve sacrificing himself for Jonathan or vice versa, because they want the best for Nancy and they want the best man for Nancy and all this stuff. And I think it could be a very emotional moment and just so heartbreaking, but also so, I don't know, good for the show, I would say. So those are my theories and speculations on Steve and Jonathan. I do think one of those characters could die in the rest of Season 5. I'm not going to go too much into this character, but I do think Murray could die just based off of how they haven't killed off anyone yet, and Murray would just be an easy character to kill off in a superhero moment. Obviously, it would be a fun death, a good death, an emotional death, but an understandable death because they do need to kill some people off. Now let's get into the main characters who could die a serious death. And there's 4 characters on this list: Will Byers, Hopper, 11, and Callie. I think one of these characters could die in the final episodes. First, let's start off with Hopper. We already saw a huge scare with Hopper in Season 5, Episode 4, when he literally had C4 in a detonator around his waist. He also got slashed right there. If that knife would have went any farther, it could have blew up the C4 and Hopper would have been dead right then and there, and 11 would have went with him. So he was this close to dying already in Season 5, Episode 4. That makes me think he's ready to sacrifice his life. He's ready to do anything he can in his power to not let 11 die. And if 11 is in any danger whatsoever and Hopper can prevent it by sacrificing himself, Hopper is going to do that. So that's how I think Hopper could definitely die in season 5. I hope he doesn't. That death might hit me the hardest just because of everything Hopper's went through. He got sent to Vietnam. His wife left him after his daughter died. All this stuff. You know, he's been addicted to drugs, alcohol. You know, he's gone through the whole 9 yards, and to see him still battling, you know, his mental health struggles to this day, and seeing him potentially sacrifice his life for 11 would absolutely kill me. It would just, I would break down. I would 100% break. I might be depressed in real life for like a week after that, seriously. But I do think it's a possibility that Hopper could die in the final season just based off what we've seen in Volume 1. Before Volume 1, I was like, Hopper's probably not going to die, but you know, I guess there's a chance. After seeing Volume 1, there's definitely a chance Hopper dies in the final season. Now let's go to 11. Obviously, I'm still on the fence with 11. I still think there's like a 50-50 chance. The only way she would die is just because she would sacrifice her life for everyone, you know? But then again, for how protective Hopper is of her, I feel like he would prevent her from dying. So I'm not as high on 11 dying anymore after watching Volume 1. I would say it's like a 40% chance he does, 60% chance she doesn't. So that's where I'm at with 11. Now let's go to Callie. So the reason I think Callie could die is because she's been trapped in this building for who knows how long, probably since season 3. And if that's the case, it's been multiple years in the show. And, you know, obviously she's going to help 11 and Will try to defeat Vecna. And if she sees her sister in danger, she could easily want to sacrifice her life for 11 because she's like, well, I've been trapped here all along. I don't really have anything else to live for. I don't want her to die. She has all these family and friends and everything. And Callie could easily sacrifice her life in the final episode for her sister, and that could 100% happen. And I think it would be a good and emotional death and a good death for the show and give Callie's storyline more meaning and purpose moving forward in certain things, even though moving forward doesn't really exist because there's not going to be any spin-offs, but you get what I'm saying. I think there's around a 50-50 chance Callie can die as well. Moving on to Will Byers. After seeing Will Byers get his powers, I made a theory saying that Vecna's going to give Will his eye because the eye of Vecna, if he uses his eye, you know, he'll gain powers, but the more he uses those powers, the more he's at risk of death. I still sort of believe in that theory, even though it wasn't technically the eye of Vecna that gave him powers directly, but clearly Will Byers has Vecna's powers. So that caveat of him using those powers and potentially killing himself while he's using those powers is potentially still true. So I do think there's a chance, just because of how powerful Will is, he could use so much power that it could kill him. And maybe he does that in the final episode to save everyone. I could definitely see a scenario where Will sacrifices himself based off what we know now with his powers. I mean, especially since he's going to want revenge against Vecna. He's going to want to take Vecna down for how long he's been haunted, how long he's felt trapped in his own skin, with his sexuality, with Vecna, with everything, with all of his insecurities, all of his questions about himself. He finally can fly, you know, what Robin said. So I do think there's a scenario where Will just gets fed up. He just gets so much anger. Well, that it just happened, but like I'm talking about in the final battle, he just realizes everything Vecna's done to him and haunted his life, and just completely obliterates himself by using so much power, but takes down Vecna in the process. I could definitely see that happening even now, 4 episodes into season 5. I think the other kids like Lucas, Dustin, and Mike are most probably safe. I think Max is safe as well. I think Holly's probably going to be safe. I will say Dustin is in a weird spot right now with his emotions. You know, he's having a hard time dealing with his emotions. With Eddie, he's having a hard time grieving. He's all over the place as far as happy, sad, anger, you know, this, that, and the other, and he's just making irrational decisions, instigating the bullies at school. That's just not smart, you know. Even though what they're doing is not right and he wants revenge for Eddie, what he's doing and instigating them is not smart, because they will try to kill him. You know, they were trying to kill people in season 4. They will try to do it again. So I feel like Dustin, in his irrational responses right now to bullying and grief and all that stuff, I could see a scenario where Steve's in danger, where someone's in danger, and Dustin just steps up and he dies. But I really think all the kids are probably safe, but that's the only one I'm really like, okay, Dustin's in a weird spot right now. I could see him doing something very crazy and ended up costing him his life. But other than that, I really don't think anyone else is gonna die. Maybe Robin, but I just don't. Maybe Joyce, but I don't think those people are really that in big of a danger. All the people I talk about are really the only people that I think have a serious chance of dying in season 5. Let me know your Stranger Things season 5 death predictions after watching volume 1, your theories, your predictions, your thoughts on mine, and just what you think overall of volume 1. I thought it was incredible. I did post my review after I watched it. It was the greatest episodes I've ever watched of television in my life, especially episode 4. That's the greatest single episode I've ever seen in my life. It's basically a movie. It was incredible. I loved it so much. That's all I have for you guys in this video. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace out.